kicked out of my own home to keep my dad's secret. The Heartbreak. Nicole Matthews had always seen her family home as a sanctuary, a place filled with warm memories, laughter, and the quiet strength of the bond she shared with her father, David. At 28, she was fiercely devoted to him, especially after the years they spent navigating life together as just the two of them. David was a gentle man, carrying unseen scars from a troubled past, but in Nicole's eyes, he was her world. The small brick house nestled in a quiet neighborhood was more than just a structure. It was where her heart belonged, the only place she truly knew as home. That evening, however, the house felt different. The air was thick with tension before the dinner guests even arrived. Nicole had been helping her father prepare for what was to be a simple family gathering, something to celebrate David's recent promotion at work. But it wasn't just a celebration. It was the night Jessica Turner, David's new wife, would formally introduce herself to the people who mattered most to them. Nicole had met Jessica a handful of times before, but she couldn't shake the feeling that beneath Jessica's polished exterior lurked something cold, calculating. Something that didn't fit in the warmth of their family. Nicole wasn't naive. She saw Jessica watching her with those tight, unreadable eyes, as if measuring her, sizing up how much trouble she might cause. The first words came masquerading as polite small talk, but there was an edge beneath the surface, a subtle jab concealed by a smile. Nicole tried to brush it off, focusing on her father's happiness. But then, as the evening unfolded, subtle remarks turned into cutting accusations. Jessica's voice, cool and deliberate, rose above the murmur of the dinner guests. "It's surprising, really," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. "How someone who claims to care about their family can be so selfish. David's been carrying so much, yet Nicole, well, she seems more interested in drama than support." Her words landed with a sharpness that drew startled gasps from the assembled guests. Eyes that had once looked at Nicole kindly now darted with suspicion and judgment. Nicole's heart pounded in her chest, her face burning. She opened her mouth to defend herself. But the venom in Jessica's carefully crafted accusations left no room for rebuttal. Whispers started to spread around the table. Talk of Nicole's irresponsibility, selfishness, even hints of betrayal that made no sense but planted seeds of doubt. The worst moment came when David, usually so steady and kind, looked torn. Jessica had whispered poison into his ear earlier, isolating Nicole under the guise of protecting him from further hurt. And now, with all eyes on her, he hesitated before speaking. His voice was low, hesitant, carrying the weight of an impossible decision. "Nicole, maybe it's best if you gave us some space. Perhaps you should consider staying elsewhere for a while." The words hit Nicole like a punch to the stomach. Her own father, the man who had been her fortress, was asking her to leave the only home she'd ever known. Tears welled up unbidden as she glanced around the room, seeking support, but saw only uncomfortable silence and a few sympathetic but helpless looks. She felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The vibrant walls of her childhood home now seemed strange and unwelcoming. Every whispered accusation and every sideways glance felt like a weight pressing down on her soul. How had it come to this? How could the place that was supposed to shelter her become the very place that betrayed her? With trembling hands, Nicole began gathering her things, her mind racing but her spirit stubbornly refusing to break completely. In this moment of profound humiliation and heartache, a small but fierce flame of determination sparked within her. This was not the end. It could not be. She just didn't know how to fight back yet. The moments after David's words echoed around the room were suffocating for Nicole. She clutched her purse tightly, the leather stiff and cold against her fingers, grounding her in a reality that felt anything but real. The room, once filled with warmth and soft chatter, had drained of comfort. The weight of Jessica's accusations lingered like a dark cloud, swirling in whispers and sideways glances. Nicole's throat tightened, but tears refused to fall. Instead, a fierce ache settled deep in her chest, a mixture of betrayal, confusion, and devastation. Walking through the familiar halls of the house, Nicole felt every step echo like a painful reminder that she no longer belonged here. Her mind replayed every subtle insult Jessica had laced into her words, each one designed to chip away at Nicole's dignity. It wasn't just humiliation. It was a calculated act of domination. Jessica knew exactly how to cut deep, how to isolate Nicole without raising suspicion. And worse, she had planted seeds of mistrust in David's heart, turning him against the only daughter who had ever stood firmly by him. Nicole's room, once a haven filled with trophies, photographs, and bright memories, now seemed alien. The bedspread, the books on the nightstand, the soft glow from the lamp, all belonged to a life that suddenly felt like a distant memory. The real pain wasn't just losing the space. It was the shattering of trust. The father she knew was beneath layers of doubt, manipulated by a woman whose smile masked cruelty. She wondered if David truly believed the harsh lies Jessica spun, or if he was just blinded by the desire to protect himself from the past wounds he'd been hiding. The next days were a blur of moving from one temporary place to another, sometimes a cramped motel room, other times the couch of a sympathetic coworker. Each new bed was a cold reminder of the home she'd been ripped from. But more suffocating than the physical displacement was the emotional torment. Nicole wrestled with questions that felt like knives twisting in her mind. How could she have been so wrong about Jessica? What secrets was her father hiding? And most painfully, would anyone believe her truth? Around her, whispers persisted. At work, among neighbors, even distant relatives. A narrative Jessica crafted was gaining traction, painting Nicole as the troublemaker, the selfish daughter who couldn't get along. Nicole's phone would vibrate with vague messages from acquaintances, the kind that hinted at judgment without outright cruelty, but cruel enough to sting. Yet amid the storm, a few voices of unwavering support flickered in the darkness. Her childhood friend, Tim, reached out, his messages kind and reassuring, reminding her that she wasn't alone. Even Mrs. Caldwell, the elderly neighbor who always watched over the family garden, brought homemade soup and words of quiet encouragement. Despite these glimmers of kindness, Nicole's confidence waned. It was easier to unravel when faced with such calculated betrayal. She felt the gnawing loneliness of being cast out by the family she loved, her identity and loyalty questioned in public ways she never imagined possible. Every night, she lay awake, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, the stark silence teaching her how heavy solitude could really be. Yet beneath the layers of hurt, a faint spark refused to die. Nicole kept recalling something her mother had once told her before she disappeared years ago. In the face of darkness, you find your own light. That memory was fragile, but it was enough to keep her tethered to hope. If you ever find yourself facing similar moments of doubt and heartache, remember, you're not alone. Sometimes the hardest battles reveal the deepest strength within. Hold on to those flickers of faith. They are the beginning of real courage. In the days that followed her abrupt eviction, Nicole grappled with the dizzying swirl of emotions and the practical realities of life upended. She threw herself into finding a new job, something that would allow her some financial independence, a small island of control amid the chaos. But even the simplest tasks felt like insurmountable hurdles. Every application, every interview, was shadowed by the gnawing doubt Jessica's whispered accusations had planted. Could she convince strangers of the truth when even her own father was silenced by lies? Her phone buzzed relentlessly, questions from friends or colleagues peppering her with gentle concern, some cautious, others veiled skepticism. "Are you sure you're okay, Nicole?" one text asked. "Maybe there's more than meets the eye." Another comment online was cruelly sarcastic, suggesting she perhaps wasn't the perfect daughter after all. Each message was a jab, each unanswered or carefully worded reply a painful reminder that judgment had overtaken support. Still, Nicole refused to let herself sink into despair. She took slow walks through her old neighborhood, clutching memories of better days. The echo of children playing, gardeners chatting, the scent of fresh coffee from the corner cafe. It all felt like fragments of a world she was desperate to reclaim. But a stubborn door slammed. Neighbors who once greeted her warmly now offered only distant nods. their eyes flickering with the tales narrated behind her back. At the job interviews, Nicole's nerves tangled with hope. She rehearsed answers, controlled her tone, tried to appear composed despite the fire burning in her chest. Slowly, she began to piece together a tentative mosaic of a future. One that didn't necessarily include her father's house, but still offered dignity and purpose. Yet, her heart ached with unanswered questions. What exactly was Jessica hiding? How deep did her manipulation go? Small, hopeful moments punctuated the struggle. Tim, her steadfast friend, insisted on meeting weekly, his support a balm to her bruised spirit. "You're stronger than you know," he reassured her one chilly afternoon over coffee. "Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Mrs. Caldwell's warm smile and occasional visits with fresh-baked cookies reminded Nicole that kindness still existed beyond the cold walls of betrayal. But the shadows entrenched themselves too. A chance encounter with David in a crowded marketplace was a silent testament to their fractured bond. He glanced away quickly, eyes clouded with guilt, or perhaps confusion. Nicole's attempt to speak was cut short, swallowed by the noise of the bustling street and the unspoken distance now hanging thick between them. Despite the setbacks, Nicole fought to keep the spark alive inside her, a promise to herself that she would find the truth, not only to clear her name, but to protect the father she loved from the hidden burden Jessica carried. Each small victory, each new contact or job prospect, was a thread woven into a fragile tapestry of hope. If you're feeling lost or crushed by unfair accusations, remember that even in darkness, small steps can lead you forward. Sometimes resilience starts with simply refusing to give up. Every story like Nicole's teaches us that pain doesn't have to define our future. Hold on to those moments of hope. They might just guide you back to your own light. The days grew heavier, and with each passing moment, Nicole found herself sinking deeper into a pit of despair she hadn't imagined possible. Despite her efforts to rise above the storm, the relentless tide of judgment and falsehoods wore her down. The isolation wasn't just physical. It gnawed at her sense of worth, twisting memories of love and trust into a bitter darkness that cloaked her heart. The worst blow came when news spread that Jessica had quietly taken control of the family home's assets. Nicole learned from a neighbor, with a mix of disbelief and heartbreak, that the house which once welcomed her presence was being prepared for sale. The announcement was made as if Nicole had no stake in it, no right to fight for the life she had built alongside her father. She wasn't just losing a house, she was losing a part of herself. One evening, after a particularly grim day filled with rejection and cold shoulders, Nicole found herself sitting on the edge of a park bench, watching a group of children play under fading sunlight. Their laughter echoed in sharp contrast to the bleak weight on her chest. The pain of being cast out, accused and betrayed, was almost too much to bear. Had her father truly forgotten all the sacrifices, all the love shared over the years? Or had Jessica's poisonous whispers drowned out the truth in his heart? Nicole's phone buzzed again, this time a text from Jessica's closest friend, a message laced with thinly veiled mockery about Nicole's comings and goings and unstable behavior. It was a cruel reminder that the battle wasn't just for a house or reputation. It was a relentless war for dignity and identity. And yet, in the bleakest moment, a quiet resolve began to stir. She remembered her mother's words, the flicker of kindness from Tim and Mrs. Caldwell, and even a phone call from Paulo Bennett, an old family friend who had always kept a watchful eye from a distance. Paulo's voice was calm but firm as he spoke, offering a promise. "Nicole, I'm looking into some things that don't sit right. You're not alone in this." The thought of a possible ally sparked a fragile hope inside her, even as the world around her seemed intent on tearing her down. But she couldn't pretend the pain wasn't real. Each rumor, each piece of evidence against her, like invisible wounds she carried everywhere. Nicole's solitude was punctuated by nights of silent tears, wrestling with the unbearable weight of injustice and the fear that she might never reclaim what was lost. Her reflection in a mirror stared back with a mixture of exhaustion and a flicker of stubborn determination. She was at her lowest, yet deep inside, a small voice whispered that surrender wasn't an option. If you're facing moments when everything feels like it's falling apart, hold tight. The depth of your struggle doesn't predict your end. It might just be the turning point. When the storm is fiercest, that's often when the seeds of change quietly take root. You're stronger than you think, and sometimes the darkest nights give rise to the brightest dawns. Keep believing. After the relentless storm of humiliation Helena had endured at the office, she found herself retreating deeper into the sanctuary of her small apartment. The walls, once familiar and comforting, now seemed to close in around her, mirroring the weight of humiliation settled heavy on her chest. Every whispered laugh, every curt glance from her colleagues, replayed in her mind like a merciless echo she couldn't escape. The pit of despair seemed impossible to climb out of. Yet, despite the crushing shame and isolation, a faint ember of resilience glimmered beneath the surface. As she sat by the window, watching the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city streets, her gaze fell upon a small, weathered journal she had tucked away on a shelf. It wasn't just any old notebook. It was the diary she had kept throughout her college years, a time when she had been full of hope and dreams, convinced she could take on the world without fear. For the first time in weeks, Helena hesitated, then reached out and pulled the journal towards her. Her fingers trembled slightly, anticipating the flood of memories. She opened it to a random page, fingers brushing over neat handwriting describing her youthful aspirations, the passion she had felt for her career in marketing. A smile flickered on her lips, fragile but real. The words reminded her of the person she once was before self-doubt and external judgment wore her down. In that stillness, a sudden realization dawned on her. She had been defined only by others' opinions and whispers for far too long. The humiliation was a painful chapter, but it did not have to be her whole story. Helena's eyes scanned the sentences where she'd once penned, "I will stand tall, even when the world tries to make me small." She recalled the passion behind those commitments. A subtle but important shift began, a tiny seed of hope that perhaps she still had some agency left. Determined to claw back some semblance of control, Helena pulled out her phone and hesitated over the contact list before selecting the number she had deleted weeks before, her college mentor, Helen Reardon. A woman of experience and fierce encouragement who had once believed in her potential without ever caring about her stumbles or flaws. The line rang twice, then she heard a warm voice on the other end, instantly filling the quiet void with unexpected kindness. "Helen, it's me, Helena," she uttered softly, her voice quivering, as if unsure a decade-old connection would respond. But to her surprise, her mentor's tone was unwaveringly supportive. "I don't know where I went wrong. I've been crushed at work, humiliated, and I'm struggling. Could we please talk?" Helen's reply was immediate and sincere. "You're never alone, Helena. Tell me everything." Over the next hour, Helena poured out the layers of hurt, shame, and the heavy silence she'd been grappling with. The catharsis of speaking openly was both painful and freeing. Helen listened without interruption, occasionally asking insightful questions that revealed cracks in Helena's perspective, ways she had internalized blame far beyond what was justified. "Sometimes the hardest battles we fight," Helen said gently, "are the ones inside ourselves. You deserve to be seen for who you are, not the distortion others create. There's strength in kindness, even when it feels like the world isn't kind to you." Helena absorbed this like a lifeline. It was the first time in weeks she found clarity amid chaos. Her mentor suggested something surprising, engaging in a community forum for women in business who had weathered similar storms, where sharing stories led to mutual healing and strategic advice. Later that evening, resting with a cup of chamomile, Helena felt a flicker of courage. She began drafting a carefully honest post about her experience, the humiliation, the lingering pain. but also the faint hope of rising from it. She hesitated before sending. Vulnerability often invited risk, but something inside urged her on. The response was almost instantaneous. Messages of encouragement poured in, from strangers who had battled their own workplace injustices, and from women who applauded her bravery. A newfound network began to weave around her, threads of empathy and solidarity that felt surprisingly empowering. The collective voice of shared adversity created a shield she hadn't even realized she needed. Yet, beneath this growing strength, uncertainty lingered. Could this virtual support translate into real-world change? Was it truly possible to reclaim her dignity and assert her place without being crushed again by the echo chamber of whispered judgments? The question hung heavy as the night deepened. But the first step had been taken. Helena had acknowledged her pain, reached out, and accepted that she was worthy of support when everything felt designed to diminish her. The path ahead was unknown, fraught with the potential for setbacks, but also shimmering with the promise of transformation. Her story was far from over. The ember was glowing, no longer just flickering, ready perhaps to ignite something greater than humiliation could ever extinguish. The day dawned hazy with a drizzle that seemed to wash away the heaviness clinging to Helena's thoughts. Still, beneath the gray sky, a fresh resolve settled firmly in her chest. After last night's small triumph of sharing her story online, she felt the stirrings of possibility, not just of coping, but of reclaiming her narrative on her terms. Taking a deep breath, Helena prepared herself to step out of the shadows of doubt. At work, the atmosphere remained tense and chilling, but Helena carried with her something the humiliations could not steal: the knowledge she was not alone. As she logged into her computer, an unexpected notification blinked, a message from an unfamiliar number with a link to a local women's networking event, sent anonymously but unmistakably connected to the online community she had joined. The invitation hinted at a space where voices like hers could be heard, and where strength was forged through solidarity. Heart pounding, she chose to attend, stepping into a warmly lit room filled with faces both kind and determined. There, amidst conversations sprinkling courage and shared struggles, she met Angela, a seasoned marketing executive whose blunt honesty and empathy cut through the fog of Helena's insecurities. Angela listened carefully as Helena recounted the humiliation from weeks before, the whispered betrayals, and the deep wells of isolation. "Helena," Angela said firmly, "what happened isn't your fault. What defines us is how we respond. You've already begun that by standing here today." Her words were balm to Helena's raw spirit and a spark that ignited hidden courage. Days later, armed with advice gleaned from her new allies, Helena crafted a calm yet firm response to the hostile email threads and the gossip at work. She meticulously gathered evidence, anonymous remarks, veiled criticisms masked as jokes, and presented everything to the HR department, demanding accountability with a quiet but unyielding strength. The tides shifted subtly but unmistakably. But the true turning point came unexpectedly during the company's weekly town hall meeting. The CEO, a sharp but often distant man, announced a new initiative focusing on workplace respect and inclusion, an acknowledgement of underlying problems no longer seen as marginal. Helena sat rigid but hopeful as the CEO outlined plans for anonymous reporting channels and professional conduct workshops. Suddenly, a murmur erupted from the back. It was Lisa, one of the colleagues who'd whispered cruelly about Helena. Feeling the room's eyes on her as well as on Helena, Lisa's face betrayed a mixture of guilt and surprise. Then, unexpectedly, she spoke. "I want to apologize for my words and actions. They were wrong. I let fear and competition shadow my judgment." The confession hung in the air, a moment of vulnerability that stunned not only Helena, but the entire audience. Helena felt a complicated mix of emotions: relief, wariness, and a faint glimmer of something deeply human: forgiveness. She nodded gently, accepting the apology without a word, her eyes steady and full of newfound dignity. backstage away from the scrutinizing crowd. Colleagues who once avoided Helena now approached with cautious respect, seeking to understand rather than judge. The dynamic was shifting, a ripple spreading through the company culture that, while fragile, held the promise of lasting change. Meanwhile, the anonymous online community continued to be a lifeline for Helena. One message stood out: a former client who had heard of Helena's ordeal and offered an opportunity to consult on a high-profile campaign. The offer wasn't just a career boost, it was a recognition that her talents remained unblemished by others' cruelty. As word began to circulate about Helena's resilience and the company's new direction, the gossip mill slowed, replaced by conversations of growth and respect. The antagonists who had thrived on humiliation found their influence waning, replaced by those who championed fairness and kindness. Through it all, Helena learned a profound truth. Humiliation, while painful, could be the crucible in which strength is forged. The kindness she'd received, the unexpected apologies, and the solidarity of strangers had collectively rewritten her story from one of despair to one of empowerment. If you're battling moments that feel unbearable, remember, the power to rise often begins with the courage to admit pain and seek connection. Sometimes, the darkest moments light the way to the brightest transformations. Don't be afraid to reach out. Your story matters more than you realize. The following weeks marked a turning point in Helena's journey, one where her courage blossomed into undeniable strength. The atmosphere at the office, once cold and hostile, began to thaw as the initiatives announced during the town hall took root. Helena found herself no longer shrinking in the shadows, but stepping into the light with a quiet yet growing confidence. Her decision to officially address the toxic behavior through HR had not been easy. There lingered a deep, gnawing fear of retaliation or being branded difficult. Yet, as the company's new policies on respect and inclusion were enforced, those whispered insults and stifled laughter gradually faded from the corridors. Coworkers who once glanced away now greeted Helena with tentative smiles. Some even sought her insight on projects, recognizing the value she had always possessed, which no humiliation could erase. One afternoon, Helena was called into a meeting with the director of marketing, a senior executive who had observed her efforts and resilience from a distance. His tone was genuine, his praise unexpected but deeply affirming. "Helena," he said, "your professionalism through difficult times has not gone unnoticed. We're considering you for lead on a major upcoming campaign." The offer wasn't just a promotion. It was a public acknowledgement of her worth, her capability, and her unwavering spirit. Helena's heart soared, but she also thought back to the pain she endured, those moments when her self-worth was mocked, when she questioned if she even belonged. The contrast was striking, yet it reminded her that struggles could coexist with triumphs. The courage it had taken to reclaim her dignity made this victory all the more meaningful. Perhaps the most surprising shift came from those who had been the most vocal in their judgment. Lisa, the colleague who'd apologized in front of the entire company, approached Helena one day with genuine humility. "I want to thank you," Lisa said quietly, "for showing me that kindness and strength are not weaknesses. You've taught me more about dignity than I ever expected." It was a moment thick with emotion, but Helena responded not with bitterness, but with grace. "We all deserve the chance to grow. Your apology means a lot." In the months that followed, Helena became a subtle but powerful advocate for kindness in the workplace. She volunteered to help newcomers navigate office dynamics and spoke candidly during workshops about the damage bullying and exclusion could inflict. Not from a place of accusation, but of shared humanity. Her vulnerability became a source of inspiration, encouraging others to stand up for themselves and each other. On her own, Helena continued to nurture the network she'd discovered online, where stories of humiliation and overcoming injustice found community and healing. Through this circle, she brokered a mentorship program between seasoned professionals and those newly facing workplace challenges, knowing firsthand how vital such support could be. The culmination of Helena's transformation came during the company's annual awards ceremony, where she was recognized for her contributions not only to the marketing campaigns, but also to fostering a respectful and inclusive culture. As she stepped onto the stage, applause swelling around her, she felt a profound sense of vindication, not rooted in revenge or resentment, but in the sheer persistence of her spirit. Her story resonated beyond office walls, becoming a testament to the power of resilience and empathy to overcome even the most painful judgments. She had been humiliated, nearly broken, but refused to be defined by cruelty. Instead, she became a beacon of hope for others navigating similar storms. Looking out at the crowd, Helena silently vowed to never forget the lessons learned, the importance of kindness, the strength in vulnerability, and the unshakable worth of one's dignity. In reclaiming her power, she had not only rewritten her story, but had planted seeds of change for all who followed. Remember, sometimes the true victory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we do. Our scars tell stories of strength, and in sharing them, we light the way for others to find their own courage. Years later, Helena stood in the sunlit corner office she had once only dreamed of occupying. The walls were adorned not with certificates or diplomas, but with photographs and mementos, representing the journey she had fought so hard to complete. The once timid woman, crushed beneath the weight of scorn and whispered mockery, had transformed into a leader whose presence commanded respect without a hint of arrogance. Her smile no longer bore the shadow of doubt, but shone with the quiet power of someone who had made peace with her past. The road to this moment had been anything but straight. Helena often reflected on those harrowing days when humiliation seemed suffocating, when the weight of unfair judgment threatened to eclipse every aspiration. But it was precisely those moments, the sharpest and darkest, that had seeded her growth. She had learned that vulnerability was not weakness, but a bridge to connection and strength. That true respect came not from silencing others, but by standing firm in kindness and authenticity. Her work extended far beyond the walls of her company now. Helena had become an advocate for workplace dignity, speaking at conferences, mentoring young women navigating the treacherous dynamics of office culture, and launching initiatives to foster empathy where division once thrived. Every speech she gave carried the gravity of hard-won wisdom, a reminder that no one should accept humiliation as their fate, and that courage, coupled with compassion, could dismantle even the most entrenched cruelty. One afternoon, a young woman named Mia entered Helena's office, eyes bright but shadowed by uncertainty. She confessed she was struggling with the toxic gossip and unjust blame at her new job. Helena listened intently, recognizing shades of her own past in Mia's story. Instead of offering quick fixes, Helena shared what she'd learned through her journey: the value of reaching out, the power of creating support networks, and the importance of believing in one's own worth regardless of others' judgments. As Mia left with a renewed sense of hope, Helena smiled to herself. This cycle of upliftment was the legacy she chose to cultivate, turning humiliation into hope, judgment into empathy, pain into purpose. The transformation she'd undergone was a testament to the resilience hidden within us all. Helena's story echoed beyond individual triumph. It was a powerful lesson in human dignity, redemption, and the unyielding spirit that refuses to be broken. If you ever find yourself at the mercy of unfair judgment or humiliation, remember, your worth is not dictated by others' eyes but by your own heart. There is strength in vulnerability and power in kindness. Keep rising, keep believing, and you will forge a path from pain to purpose. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. See you in our next story.